Guys, welcome to the eighth and final debate of round one of Expert Summit's Laser Show. We have an absolute heavyweight matchup for you right now. So before we get and introduce our debaters, I'll give you a brief history of what Expert Summit is. It's a one-on-one March Madness type debate platform where we're taking 24 of the absolute best hitting minds in the country, regardless of social media, regardless of affiliate ball. We just found guys that are smart baseball coaches, and we had them talk about hitting. So they were prepped with two questions, and then we'll have one random question. And that being said, we'll get into our sponsor. It's HitTrax. Please, guys, go follow them on Twitter and Instagram at HitTrax Official. They do amazing stuff. Currently, they're doing the HitTrax Open. Amazing event, $20,000 up for grabs. If I could hit the ball harder, I would be doing that. But unfortunately, I don't hit the ball very hard. I was a pitcher, so that stinks. That being said, I'm going to run a quick ad by HitTrax, and then we can meet our debaters. There you have it. So basically, this is an online live event. We are going to have our hiccups. Guys are going to lose connection with the internet. Their internet might not be very strong. Like you can see right now that Jordan's internet has taken away his screen. So we'll give him a moment to kind of let him get back up. In the meantime, Steve, go ahead and tell us about yourself.
Okay, well, for those who don't know, I was an All-American high school player. First-round draft choice in 1972, ninth choice with the Astros. Played about 6 years with the Astros, got as high as AA, AAA, got released. Thereafter, probably for the next 20 years, I had nothing to do with baseball. However, in the context of what I do now, I also started lifting weights when I was 9 years old, played football, had 30 scholarships, played football. So I had an ongoing interest in exercise science, which I've kind of applied certainly in various, situations over the years. I worked with James Cooper for 4 years. His group it wasn't baseball players, but not baseball, softball. It was basically football, basketball, track. He had a boxing ring. James is Adrian Peterson's trainer. James in Houston. He's a very, very smart guy. That was kind of the groundwork of being able to look really up close and personal, so to speak, in terms of what good athletes are really doing. So thereafter, I kind of turned my attention to, I found out there were these hitting instructors. I'm an old school guy. There were no hitting instructors when I was growing up, really. So I said, hey, maybe I could be one of those. And so, bottom line is I didn't assume just because I played that I knew anything really about the swing. I could do it reasonably well, but that doesn't mean I'm a very good teacher and so forth. So as everybody knows that enters into this, there's all kinds of information out there, and I was trying to wade through much of the information. A lot of it's contradictory, and I should also preface with the fact that I worked at Newsweek magazine from 91 to 94, the Houston Bureau, as a researcher, and I always like to mention that because that's where I was basically, it was my job to weed through a bunch of information in as objective way I could and try to come up with, the best information. And I really applied that when I started looking at this, hitting stuff. Bottom line, I ran across really the guy who's most influential, certainly in my lifetime in terms of hitting, Paul Nyman's website. It's Set Pro. And I told my wife I didn't have a computer at the time. I said, will you do me a favor, print out all this stuff this guy said over the last year. I read it all the weekend, called him up, said, look, I don't really know who the hell you are, but you're the smartest guy I've ever run across. And so that kind of started a relationship with he and I over the years. And I certainly consider myself a student of the Set Pro information. And I basically tried to, operationalize it as much as I can over the years. So that's kind of, that's close enough to a nutshell, isn't it?
Yeah, that's great stuff. Good stuff. Jordan, go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself. Jordan, can you hear us?
Ken, are you talking to me? I can't hear you. Not coming through.
Oh, no. All right. So I'm going to kick Jordan out here. Let him get back in this room. So while we let Jordan get back in the room, basically what we'll do is I'll give you guys a sneak peek of what kind of questions we're going to ask. So Steve is going to get to answer questions 1 first and questions 3 first. Question 3, they were not prepped to. It will be a random wheel spin where we'll get the question. I will read it out loud to them, give them a moment to digest the question. And then after they digest the question, I will read it once more, and there we'll have it. They'll start speaking. So the questions that we are going to be talking about are going to be with motion sensors on bats and on bodies. The kinetic chain has become a topic of discussion. There are hitters that succeed without having the best kinetic chain. Would they be even better if their kinetic chain was ideal? And along with that, what is your thinking of the ideal kinetic chain? Jordan's entered the room again. The second question is going to be, how can you help hitter break out of a mental slump? So we have 2 different breakdowns. So welcome back, Jordan. Jordan, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Nah, it happens. Don't worry about it. It's a live online event. Jordan, go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, for sure. I am a minor league hitting coach with the Cincinnati Reds currently. I own Rounding Third Baseball Performance here in Fort Collins, Colorado. And I most recently started a website called hitbig.net, hitdig.net. And it is a living, breathing book about hitting. I've thought a couple times about writing a book, and it just frustrates me because I feel like this information has to kind of mutate over time. And when you write a book, it's published. That's it. You got to restart it, or you got to go back and modify it greatly. And, besides the fact that I really hate writing, I think this is like the best way I could reach a lot of people and at the lowest cost. I think, unfortunately, baseball and I think other travel sports too are limited with the number of people we can reach. And maybe Steve thinks this as well because he has a platform too. But, it's a way to reach a lot of people at a lower cost and you can get more people involved. And then I also do a subscription option where you can do monthly video analysis. You can have Voxer support, and it's kind of a mentorship for less than the cost of a lesson every month. So it's something I'm pretty passionate about because I don't want people who can, the only people that can afford it to be the middle class and above. I want everybody to be able to access good hitting information and give everybody the best possible chance to further develop in their career. I think I'm so passionate about it because I had good coaches who inspired me and got me excited. And I went from hitting 2 home runs in high school to hitting 36 in my, just in my college seasons, not including summer ball. Broke my school home run record in single season, and just something turned there. And I got passionate about fitness. I got passionate about strength and conditioning. Changed my major. Became a certified strength coach, biomechanics specialist. I got all these other certifications that don't necessarily make me a better coach, but they make me a better information gatherer so I can turn it into something that's actionable and serviceable to as many players as possible. I think that's the key as a team coach is to be able to reach as many people and screw up as few people as possible. So that's kind of my quick background. Love hitting. I'm passionate about it. I had no idea what I was doing besides just being a big knuckle-dragging meathead and trying to hit balls as far as I could and get them off the ground. But I think I've been able to refine my approach that way and kind of be, bridge the gap between swinging and making a swing work in a game setting against tough live pitching.
No, that's fantastic stuff. This first question actually flows great into both of your respective backgrounds. So that being said, Steve, you're going to get the first question first. The question is, with motion sensors on bats and on bodies, the kinetic chain has become a topic of discussion. There are hitters that succeed without having the best kinetic chain. Would they be even better if their kinetic chain was ideal? And along with that, what is your thinking on the ideal kinetic chain? Go ahead, Steve.
Okay, before I say anything, I'd be remiss unless I mentioned 2 other guys. Jim Dixon, who wrote the Exceptional Player in about 1993. He had a really kind of serious influence on how I understood how the trunk functions. A very, very smart guy, ahead of his time, as Paul Nyman said. The other guy, Mel Siff, arguably the best sports scientist in the last 50 or so years, unfortunately died at about 56. but a tremendous intellect. And it's not so much he teaches people what to think, as more or less how to think about training. So I just want to mention those two guys. Look, in terms of the kinetic chain, I mean, obviously you hear that phrase a lot. I kind of have a contrarian thought of question the premise, so to speak. So in this case, kinetic chain, well, what does it mean exactly? I mean, basically, when you're talking about a kinetic chain, you're just talking about a series of linkages of joints and bones connected via muscle and fascia, which can combine to create essentially infinite movement. So what is, in other words, all dynamic movement is basically a kinetic chain. So it only begs the question of, okay, what is a good kinetic chain in the specific context of, let's say, throwing or swinging, in this case, swinging. So from my vantage point, how I think of it, there's a couple of basic understandings that I'm basically working off of. One is the basic physics, biomechanics of, if you understand Paul Nyman's posture, connection, and rotation, overarching that is simply the understanding of how to optimally create and transfer momentum from the body to the bat. That's an essential question. And that has certain aspects of certain dynamics to it. I've certainly mentioned many times, we talked about the compound pendulum model, the golf model that's a guy made basically a compound pendulum, the iron Byron. So what is, and that's a very, as I said, it's essentially an unassailable model in terms of understanding how to create angular force. In this case, we're rotating around the spine. So I've got this device here that I've used many times to try to explain this. Basic physics aspects, you're going to optimize rotation around an axis if that line of motion is running perpendicular to the axis. So in this case, you have the axis here and then the rotation here. This is the basic model of how to optimize, basically momentum and how to transfer it into the bat head. So in the case of hitting, it kind of is this kind of situation or this kind of dynamic where I've tilted over the spine. Now, obviously, if we're on the moon, I'll stand up and demonstrate this. If I was on the moon, balls are coming, there's no gravitational effect, so I would stand here and turn without any basic tilt. But I'm going to do this and strap my lead arm to it and start to turn. So this essential understanding of how to create very good bat and body alignment starts with those two basic angles. Let's say if I lift up as I'm starting to turn, if I drop the bat, if I start to turn, if I move this arm too much this way, if I let it lag behind too much, if I'm not rotating, just taking my arms and pushing out, all those are flaws, all those are inefficiencies. And certainly, at the lower levels, let's say non-elite hitters, most people are suffering from this misunderstanding. Another one would be, people come up, they stand up. Well, you basically ruin what I refer to as kind of the tilted tornado, wherein, again, it's kind of like a tornado, but in this case, since gravitational effects are bringing the ball downwardly, I'm going to tilt over in this manner and start turning. So this aspect of momentum transfer is a big deal. The other parameter that I would talk about, the basic, more functional parameters, are you creating movement, posture movement, such that you're basically optimizing swing quickness, bat speed, and barrel accuracy. Barrel accuracy meaning simply, how many balls are you slightly getting under? I always use the parameters, try to hit every ball 10 feet over the shortstop or second baseman's head. If you've got enough power, those will be home runs, but I'm not, per se talking about home run hitting. I'm simply saying optimizing the ability to be very, very quick. When you're talking about, 90 plus mile an hour fastballs, swing quickness is a big deal, but you also want to develop fairly high levels of bat speed. Swing quickness, bat speed are not, they're related, but they're not the same thing. So these parameters, momentum transfer, and if I'm teaching somebody, what am I trying to get them to do? Develop better momentum transfer, create movement dynamics that yield over time better swing quickness, better bat speed, and better barrel accuracy. Okay, so those are the, within that, there's all kinds of details. I won't, try to bother with that so much. But I'm here to say that, the understanding of a kinetic chain has, as I say about a lot of things, that really no explanatory power from my vantage point. In terms of, good hitters, let's say elite, let's say big league hitters, we're talking specifically about them. Are all of them perfect? I mean, I consider, Barry Bonds probably the gold standard in terms of efficiency of movement. He did everything right. And again, I can explain that in some detail, but we don't have time. I won't try to do that. Obviously, he's a function of tremendous, as I would say, body alignment. He knows how to create very good postures, very good movement within a swing. And he has tremendous physiology, with or without steroids. I mean, he was good without steroids, right? So he's the gold standard. There's all kinds of guys that are very, very.
Steve has paused in his mid speech, so we're actually going to take this time. Jordan, can you hear me? But we can't hear Jordan. Oh, there he goes. Jordan, we're going to go ahead, and you can go ahead and answer this question and have your rebuttal. We'll get Steve situated here.
In terms of kinetic chain here, and I don't have the question back in my chat, but I want to make sure I'm staying on topic here. But to me, bat ball collision is king, right? So everything we do is in an effort to ensure that bat ball collision is happening precisely, is happening with a ton of energy transfer. So kinetic chain should facilitate quality contact. And I think that's the bottom line, is when we're talking kinetic chain relative to the swing, and I just want to get cut to the point, we want to make sure that the system, that whatever we're training, whatever movement we're training is, number one, does it manage, does it produce, does it transmit energy? And that's number one. Number two, does it buy us time, or does it make us adjustable, right? So does it actually help us to be a hitter, a moldable hitter, an adjustable hitter, an adaptable hitter? And to me, that's where the kinetic chain provides a ton of value if it's something you want to evaluate as a hitting coach. So, in terms of, part of the question was, does, if we're not in sequence, if we're not optimal, could it still be better? And if you're Mike Trout, who doesn't have a sequence that's normal, he doesn't have a K-vest 1, 2, 3, 4 sequence. No, he doesn't need to change his kinetic chain. The kinetic chain is working for him. He is transmitting energy. He is adjustable. He is the greatest hitter in the game, arguably. So I think in terms of him, maybe when he's in his mid-30s, when he's starting to get later in his 30s, do we look at the kinetic chain and see if there's something we can do? Of course. We absolutely look at that, because as things slow down, and maybe the compensations that Mike Trout is making right now to overcome that, I believe it's 1, 3, 2, 4 sequence, is there some way we can modify that so he actually gets a little more swing decision time? So I think, to me, that's huge. Again, you have to ask yourself the question, should it be your goal to be an outlier, right? I think maybe Mike Trout would be considered an outlier in terms of his K-vest sequence. I could be wrong there, but do we want to train to have the optimal sequence? There's a reason why the data has shown that sequence is probably ideal. And should we try to probably train for what most of the best hitters in the game do? I think yes. So in terms of training, guys that are coming up, guys that are high school, college, and I think that's where a lot of our training is catered. I work with professionals, obviously, but the dimensions, the actual changes we're making are very tiny and normally over time. And so, to me, addressing this with a young player, with a high school player, is pretty important, because this becomes their foundation. How well are you transferring energy? How athletic are you? What are you doing as you continue to grow and develop? So, in theory, if we have a better sequence, if our sequence is hips, spine, shoulders, hands, if you want to simplify it like that, we get to make later decisions because we're in sequence, because we do things in a, with a kinetic chain that is shifting energy, that is transmitting energy, using the ground and using the upper body to resist. Do we get to make later decisions because of that? And I would argue yes. We don't have to fire our swing as soon and we don't have to compensate in an odd way if we have a good sequence. Does a good sequence make you hit a baseball? And that to me is where there's, sometimes we're not going to spend time with a certain guy on his kinetic chain, or we just don't have the ability to measure specifically the kinetic chain. And so, again, it comes back to, we got to tie this all back into what is going to work in a game, what is going to provide us barrel precision. And if the kinetic chain is the link that is missing there, it hasn't been addressed, that's a huge key. Number two, in terms of having a better sequence, we have the ability, to put on the brakes, right? If we're in sequence, we have the ability to put on the brakes a lot better. And you make an adjustment on the fly. If we are out of sequence, if we are a little bit, if our upper body's leaking a little bit soon, it makes things a little hard to put on the brakes because from a physiological standpoint, from that anatomical standpoint, our tissue can't appropriately move to slam the brakes on for us. So in theory there, that sequence becomes a huge deal. So I think, again, I want to bring the point home that, again, to simplify for the sake of time, is an ideal chain transfers the most energy to the barrel in the tightest window of time. And if we're going to break down the kinetic chain, in terms of this to this to this, we got to have a lower body that provides enough initial force against the upper body to get the pelvis to move. Once that pelvis is rotating, the pelvis moves into extension and anterior tilt, allows the spine to begin to make its move. The spine makes its angles, rotates along the thoracic spine, helps the shoulders to move, and helps the shoulders to be in an optimal position to create stretch, remove slack. And then our wrists deviate, supinate, pronate. They do their dance, and they do it at a really high rate of speed, hopefully, if your sequence is good. And like I said, again, we're coming back to what's the barrel doing? Is bat ball collision really effective? And if you're in sequence, if you have a great kinetic chain, if you're, for lack of a better term, maybe you call this athleticism, right? Mm-hmm. This guy moves really well. This guy rotates with speed. Bat speed works pretty well, and his barrel plane runs into the ball, in a bunch of different spots. To me, that's where we take the kinetic chain and actually make a coach who maybe doesn't necessarily have a background in human movement still be able to evaluate it, still be able to sit there and say, hey, that's funny, and we need to make sure that we address that. So,
no, that was outstanding. Both of you guys, fantastic. Steve, can you turn your camera back on? It's at the top left corner. One moment, we're getting the technology here going together.
I'm sorry for my cricket in the background.
No, it's fine.
He is under the turf.
Okay, yeah.
He is.
Steve, you're back.
He's under the turf. He lives there.
Steve, would you like to add anything on to your initial point?
No, I suppose I would quibble a little bit with the characterization of energy, because energy and momentum are different things. It's a different aspect. Momentum, I think, is a better choice for force creating momentum. The key aspect of that is force is of a vector quality. In other words, it has a direction and has a magnitude. And the thing that I demonstrated, wherein let's say I've got the lead arm here, I'm directing this lead arm along the rotational plane of the shoulders. Again, I could have, let's say I could create 100 pounds of force, but if I've misdirected, if I move this arm, if this lead arm becomes unstable, or the back arm drops, the bat drag type tendency, so on and so forth, you're going to lose momentum. Paul Nyman is very, very good at showing aspects using the compound pendulum to show very subtle changes and really amounting to aspects of disconnection that are dropping off swing speeds or throwing 5, 10, 15, 20 miles an hour. So I think the aspect of momentum transfer is a very, very important thing to try to understand. In terms of the sequencing, again, I would simply say that the parameters of sequencing, in other words, the differential between Trout's hip rotation and shoulder rotation is fairly nominal. On the other hand, somebody like Harper's got a bigger magnitude of rotation of the hips. Which one's better? Well, they both work in a sense. How you work out that sequence exactly, kind of amounts to individual look at people and saying, okay, again, bat speed, bat quickness, barrel accuracy. What do we need to do within that context to get this hitter better?
Great
Does
stuff.
that make sense?
No, that was outstanding. Both of you guys. Jordan, I'll let you have the last say on this.
Yeah, I would agree with Steve. Again, the direction piece, your kinetic chain has to apply to the sport. The way you are managing momentum, the way you are creating direction has to be specific to baseball, right? The kinetic chain occurs in all sports. The kinetic chain occurs whether it's tennis, golf, and it doesn't even have to be a rotational specific sport, right? Inherently, everything is rotational. There's this locomotive action that happens in the body that it has to work around the spine to create some sort of tension. And I think that's where sometimes we get lost as coaches is if we go too deep down a hole, if we go into, this chain's not optimal, this isn't working, we just have to be careful, right? We have the power to screw somebody up. And if we, in terms of optimizing chain, in terms of evaluating chain, it has to come back to really what Steve said is direction, right? Does this actually turn into something that covers a portion of the zone? Does this actually turn into a reality for a hitter? Does it buy us more time? Can we hit it more depth, or different depths, different pitch types, different locations? And connecting the kinetic chain to barrel direction, barrel speed, and the ability to decelerate abruptly, to slam on the brakes abruptly, is really what the kinetic chain is about, more than just energy and momentum.
Guys, unbelievable. Both of you. That was an unbelievable explanation of both of that. That was incredible. We're going to move on to our second question. Jordan, you're going to get to answer this one first, okay? So the question is, how can you help a hitter break out of a mental slump?
This is a good one. I really, if we're talking specifically mental slump, right, it's not necessarily movement related, or we don't know it's movement related. Because really, I believe that everything is movement related in some way, but our software, right, the stuff that controls the hardware, has to be addressed in all facets. So I think the number one thing I would do, and I can get on a tangent on this real easy, but I think the number one thing that I would do is assess whether this is fear-based or anxiety-based, right? Take a deep dive. And if you have a good relationship with somebody, if you have built a relationship, you fostered it, which I feel like, especially at the professional level, and while my experience at the professional level is limited, and I'm not going to act like I'm up here and I know everything, but I feel like they have they're a veteran of the way they've done things for so long, and and for good reason. It works, right? It's got them there. So building that level of trust and building a relationship where it's based on communication and trust and honesty is kind of your first step in even getting a chance to coach someone on the mental side of the game. Otherwise, you're just going to think you're a crackerjack. So assessing fear and anxiety, what is the root of that? And is it because your parents aren't going to feed you dinner if you suck that night? And I think there's some unconscious fear for some guys that something really bad's going to happen. And I think maybe for those higher level guys, it's the end of their career, right? They're assuming somewhere deep down that it's the end of their career, and that's something you want to address. That's a big time fear, right? And how you pull someone away from that and provide some sort of neutral mindset and giving them some tactics, I think is your first step. Just figure out whether it's fear and anxiety based, or if it's, because it could be lack of focus. It could be a lack of ability to find your numbers or find your good mental state every day. It could be an 18-year-old guy who's first year in pro ball, and he just doesn't know what to think yet. He doesn't have any feel for what he's supposed to do yet. He hasn't reached that level of maturity. So there's a lot of ways that a coach can come in there and quickly assess, what's the first route, and then you can start going into more detail. So I think the next thing would be the players I deal with have all had success at some point in their career. I think the only time that doesn't happen is maybe roughly around like 12 to 14, and maybe those guys haven't had success yet, so they don't have anything to recall. So taking guys back through that visualization and intensive, like, what were you doing when it was good? What was going right when you were right? And being as detailed as possible, and almost kind of take that meditative route to it. Be real specific with what you're doing. So, the ability to stay neutral would be the third point I'd make. So, try to stay stoic. Try to latch onto the things you can control, and figure out what is uncontrollable, figure out what's controllable, compare those two things, and start to simplify. Allow your brain to focus on singular stuff instead of multiple things. From a training standpoint, creating a challenging environment, right? So if we create a more challenging environment that's more like a game, that provides more variability, a little more chaos, puts them back into that mental state that's causing our issues in the first place, aren't we getting a chance to sit there and stop everything and being like, what the heck is going on right here, my man, right? You're physically running yourself into a number of different directions because you don't have the mental state. Your approach isn't here. Your mentality isn't here. All the pieces of the puzzle that need to be there before the swing even happens is not there, and that's why you're not anticipating well. That's why you're not reacting well. And so giving them those options physically can actually help provide a huge mental benefit.
That was fantastic. Steve, go ahead.
Well, what Jordan said initially about you kind of, as I said, I have a movement bias. I'm going to look at everything. Let's check the movements first. Many times, by experience, certainly at lower levels, guys suck and they get into a rut and they have a bad attitude because they know somehow they suck, and they suck because they're not moving well. So it's kind of like, let's check that first. The other thing, anecdotally, years ago when I played with the Astros, I was having, not hitting good. I was fed up. I said, I hate this game. God damn it, I'm quitting after this game. I hate myself. I hate the whole.
Hold on, we lost him in his story. We can hear your cricket though.
Yeah, I want to hear Steve's story.
Yeah, I'm waiting to find out why he wanted to quit. Hopefully we can get this organized. It's a shame that it's so based on Wi-Fi.
I know.
Let's see if we can get him back in here.
Are we having problems?
Yep, Steve, we're back. Go ahead, buddy. We're good. Go ahead and keep talking. All we got was we heard your last point, which was that you wanted to quit. No, all we heard was that you wanted to quit, and then we lost you.
Yeah. Oh, okay, I wanted to quit, and I came up and I hit a 3-run home run, and I said, okay, maybe I'll stay in this game a little bit longer. Point being, I had about the worst attitude you could have, but I was doing something movement-wise that allowed me to hit a 3-run home run and win the game. This is a very complex question. So, there's an interaction of physical and mental. That's kind of my point. Number one. Number two, I wrote training stuff. So I use the example of this guy who was pretty much a 530 hitter, hit the hell out of the ball. Games came, and he just froze up and couldn't hit worth a damn. So I told him, I went to him and his dad, he's about a 16-year-old guy, and I said, hey, I'm going to give you some advice. And I don't know if we can use language, and I'm going to use it anyway. I said, here's what I want you to do. When you're on deck, start thinking about hitting. I don't give a fuck. I don't give a fuck if I hit well or not. I said, I'm serious. And right before you start to hit, I want you to say it again. Point is, he was from psychology standpoint, is known as process orientation versus, I forget now, outcome orientation. So this guy was so wanting to do well, so thinking about doing well, it was killing him. So I think, when people get into slumps, their apprehension is actually worse than anything in many, many ways, I would argue. But they start really wanting to beat themselves up. Hell, I was like that. A very one thing you want to try with a lot of guys, they're very intense. They want to perform. The whole aspect of, I'm in the minor leagues. I need to get to the big leagues. Everybody's trying to do what they can to improve as much as they possibly can. Well, obviously you can overdo that. So the idea of kind of stepping back, let's say what you're practicing. The other thing I would agree with Jordan, try, as I've said many, many times, try to make practice like games and games like practice. And there's lots of ways to do that. But you want to try to develop a capacity to kind of, in practice, the game mentality in practice. That way, when you step up in the game situations, it doesn't seem so extreme, or it doesn't seem, man, this is when I really need to perform now, that kind of thing. So football is much easier. You get to just psych yourself up for a whole week to kill your opponent. But in baseball, it's much more like life. It's a day in, day out kind of, somewhat, I won't say drudgery exactly, but you've got to have a kind of an even mindset. It's very helpful. And don't get too up, don't get too down. That's kind of the, some of the generic things that I say, to hitters when I see, we'll check physical things. Let's say, yes, you're in a slump because you're now hip sliding. You were rotating into foot plan, let's say, pretty well. Now you're not, and you're late, and then basic movement parameters that got you success. Okay, I'll stop now.
No, that was excellent. You're fine. Very good stuff. Jordan, would you like to add anything?
I don't have a whole lot to add because I think that it's very individual, right? Mental slump is, is it a movement-based slump? I think what Steve said on the part of, making sure you have good refined movement is it's a lot easier to be confident when you prepare really well. And if you're prepared well, if you have a team of people around you that have helped you prepare well, the game slows down for you. And everybody loves to talk about slow the game down, slow the game down, slow the game down. And well, if the game feels fast, you can't just tell yourself to slow the game down. It doesn't work like that. If it did, I would just give you that magic potion, be like, hey, slow the game down, man. It works every time I say that, right? And it doesn't work that way. It's the way you prepare that creates a slower game. It creates a game that is manageable, that creates a game that allows you to be mentally clear, simple-minded in the moment, and have that neutral mindset in the moment. So what I would say is, if we prepare guys with good movement, if we prepare guys to move really well, and sometimes in a blocked practice setting, right? Variable and chaotic settings are awesome, but we have to spend some time in block settings, and the constraint becomes the ability to execute good movement. It doesn't always have to be some task. The constraint or the task we're shooting for is the constraint, right? And if you have that intensive ability to do practice, then you can create better movement. Better movement in turn is going to give you more adjustability, right? It's going to give you the ability to be reactive. You've already got yourself started. You have a good set of movements. You're athletic. Now you can be reactive in the moment. You can trust yourself in the moment. And if you're able to talk kind of the way I'm talking right now to your guys early on, and when I coached college baseball, this was in the fall. Prepare your guys like this in the fall. Give them a chance to talk about this and work through this, and let them know that practice is going to be a little hard sometimes because we need to speed you up. We need to put you there as many times as possible so the game actually feels a little more operable, a little smoother, so that we don't have these highs and lows mentally like Steve was talking about.
That's great stuff. Really, really good. Steve, I'll let you have the final say on this.
Yeah, like you say, I think we all agree it's a pretty complex question, and it can, depend on the type of individual. No question about that. I would kind of add it in a somewhat related aspect of, the aspects of what's known as flow or the zen of baseball or tennis or whatever. The aspects of being able to blank out stuff and get into the moment. Very abstract thought, but anybody's played has probably been in and out of that. How do you capture it? Lots of books have been written about that kind of thing, but I do think, it kind of starts with understanding how to work the process, whether it's physical and or mental, the process by which you perform well. Learn to understand that, and that starts with aspects of practice. I'll just simply mention quickly, I worked with a guy, this 14-year-old guy, came 2 hours away. I watched him warm up. He was doing dynamic warm-ups. This guy was very precise in his dynamic warm-ups. Most people are very sloppy, but this guy was very focused. And I said right away, this guy is going to be good because he's doing what he needs to do. Every time he gets out and in any manner of working at baseball, he's very, very focused. And that helps. Because when you start to go negative, you find ways to get back into those things that really help you, as I say, find the optimal level of arousal for you, right? So, okay.
That was, guys, unbelievable. I know you guys probably can't see the comment section, but the guys are saying that this has been the best debate so far. They're loving what they see. Keep it up. That being said, we're going into our final round. So for the people that are viewing this for the first time, this last question is a question that neither of these guys have been able to prepare for. We're going to go to a random wheel spin here where I'm going to share my screen, and let's go ahead and see what this final question is going to be. I will read it twice for our debaters. Oh, we got this question again. This is a fun one. I think this actually works for both of your wheelhouse. So the question is, how do you teach young kids to produce force in the swing? Any drills you use to make this more effective? So in that time, I'm going to let them digest it. Guys, I'm posting the question in the comment section if you would like to read it yourself. In the meantime, while I let them digest the question, remember, check out HitTrax. HitTrax Official on both Instagram and Twitter. They're running the HitTrax Open. It's an incredible tool. If you are a facility owner, an affiliate, it's kind of become a must-have tool for your facility. They do amazing stuff. Their customer service is fantastic. They're right on top of it. If you have any issues, they'll jump on it. So that being said, we're going to get back to this. Steve, you're going to have this question first. The question is, how do you teach young kids to produce force in the swing, and any drills you use to make this more effective? Go ahead.
Well, I guess it's my chance to promote my website, what the things that I actually sell. I do have, I think, about 5 things you can buy independently or together. The lead arm swing, the back arm swing, this concept that I've kind of developed, how to sit and turn. And then there's me swinging, showing what I consider, using my arm swing, show, what I consider elite swing characteristics of elite hitters. That being said, and I spent years basically developing these swings, spent hundreds of hours kind of working through these things. I would also say that, I spent 20 years developing kind of movement pattern exercises, people like Mel Siff, certainly anatomy trains, Tom Myers, numerous guys that are kind of focusing in on fascial tissue, so, in a kind of generic sense. Those exercises are perfectly designed with the thought in mind, how do I create better joint actions, interactions in the specific context of swinging, throwing. So I do have quite a bit of information on that. From a standpoint of teaching people, essentially, for the most part, I'm going to teach everybody the same thing. In other words, aspects of postural dynamics, learning how to rotate, learning how to create various types of stabilities with the legs and various body parts in the context of swinging and throwing. It's going to be the same stuff. It's just going to be at one level. This guy's competency is such that, okay, there's going to be aspects of, technique building or progressions. And so, I can't go into the details of it, but everybody's going to learn really the same kinds of things. It's just going to be with, let's say if it's a AAA guy, like Jordan was talking about, the parameters of his inefficiencies are going to be pretty small, but we're still going to do, from a generic standpoint, I'm still going to do various things that have to do with creating very good back and body alignment, very good, posture, connection, and rotation, and how to develop this idea of creating, better swing quickness, better bat speed, better barrel accuracy. That's kind of it, really, from my standpoint. Anything else I could add to that? No, not unless you want me to talk for a couple more hours.
No, that's fine. That's a great answer. Jordan, go ahead.
I think number one, resistance training to me is at the top of my mind because, I'm a little biased because I think it's the thing that changed my career the most and got me more excited to play baseball, to be honest, because the bat felt lighter. I felt more control, more coordination. For a young person to understand how to control multiple joints at one time, to understand what a co-contraction is invaluable, and you can't do that. It's really hard to do that off a tee because they just never felt that. A lot of kids that are young, and if we're talking about, I just want to be clear, I'm talking about probably kids that are pre-puberty, young players, and that includes both boys and girls. Understanding the value of resistance training and figuring out how to provide more stability. I think young kids like that, they're all gas and no brakes. They spin, there's no control, they fall all over the place. They basically they don't control the start and they don't control the finish. But they figure out some sort of compensation to make bat ball collision, to make contact. And we want to be careful how we interfere with that, right? Because some of that is pretty important. Some of that is them feeling and understanding how their body moves the way they're built. So there's a blend of, we got to kind of input where we can as coaches and figure out maybe, to be honest, what more of a blanket approach is so that we can provide a lot of value without, potentially changing someone's course because we got too specific too early. So, for example, if we teach swing down, swing up, or whatever you teach, those are cues. Whatever you teach, that could negatively impact someone, that positively impact someone. So that's one of those things where coaches are good environmental, facilitators. If we do a good job at those youth levels on creating good environments, on top of creating good resistance training habits, I'm not necessarily talking about having a 10-year-old deadlift, 3 times his body weight, but I am talking about doing the hinging motion like the deadlift with the right amount of resistance that forces some sort of adaptation. So to me, resistance training is the number one thing that sticks out. Teaching a guy to accept force, teaching him to build control and stability, and sprinting. That age group, that's that under 14 age group, there's nothing else you can do on the planet that is at a 100% effort besides sprinting against somebody else and trying to beat them. Right? You incorporate the competitive aspect and the training aspect. In my mind, there is no better way to teach someone to produce force than sprinting. And we could argue this one too. This could be fun, but I believe sprinting is a huge value for youth players specifically. It also, think about the athletic value, creating athleticism is a huge value. And you can start getting into direction, reaction. There's so many ways to promote that. Somebody has good sprint habits and good sprint mechanics. In terms of drills, again, I have a website, hitbig.net. It's, I have things in there for youth players specifically, as well as like a 12-week program that is specifically built to kind of tailor to different aspects of hitting. But in terms of drills, just to go down to a couple of drills that could be really valuable for young players is bungo toss, tossing a ball to yourself and hitting it, the coordination value, the precision you get from that is probably a step one. You need to be able to toss a ball to yourself. Weighted ball, so hitting a weighted ball, you got to hit it square, you got to hit it precise. It can be a really easy thing for a youth player to do. Varied bats, not necessarily too heavy a bat, but maybe different lengths, different sizes, different shapes. Even using tiny wiffle bats for the balls. These are all things that can get them to feel themselves move faster, but also produce a little more energy, produce a little better co-contraction, load better. And the last thing I'd say would be like a weighted bag, or like a boxing bag. I have one right there, like the Wave Master. It's a really good way to get, not focus on making content, but to use your body as best as possible in training.
That's outstanding. Steve, would you like to have a counterpoint or add on to anything?
Well, let me just add a couple things. One is, as a guy who's said he started lifting weights at 9, really, I've never stopped. I certainly can't disagree with the aspect of resistance training. But let me say this, and it'd certainly be remiss unless I really got this out. When we're talking, let's say, 8 to 12-year-olds, and then even beyond, actually. After 20 years of doing this, it's a conclusion that's not going to change, which is simply this. The basic problem, from my vantage point, the number one reason why most people don't reach their potential is because it is natural it's human nature to try to use the arms to swing the bat. And so, as I've said many times, let me stand up. You see in T-ball, somebody's here, and there's the tee, and all they're doing is scribing out a path with their arms. Okay? And why are they doing that? Well, by the time that everybody gets 8 to 12 years old, 6, 7, 8, they're an expert at reaching. They've learned how to reach, certainly in sagittal space, out in front of them and so forth. And they go to a novel act of swinging. They're going to literally use the bat as an extension of their arms. That's why you see this. Any aspect of posture or rotation is an afterthought. That is a natural human condition. You can take that to the bank as far as that. Now, obviously, there are people that can do it better, but they're the outliers at 8 years old. On the other hand, if the tee is here and I simply tilt over, get this bat in this position and start turning, and then just all of a sudden the bat just uncocks. So I'm getting to this target by tilting over and turning and then letting the bat uncock, and it's going to uncock pretty naturally on its own if you do what I just did prior to that. That's completely counterintuitive. That's completely abnormal for most people. So what I learned early on in working with people, you have to get people to learn how to rotate. They're not practicing rotation when they swing. That's not what they're doing. They're using their arms, and then whatever the arms are basically pulling the hips as opposed to the reverse, right? So a lot of the emphasis early on is going to kind of try to defeat this normative arm swinging kind of strategy that most people have.
That was unbelievable, guys. Great. Jordan, are you still there? Did we lose your audio as well?
I'm here. I think you lost my video.
Okay. Well, would you like to have the final say on this?
Sure. Yep. I think there's certain aspects that you teach a youth player that are kind of those must-haves. And I think there are people out there that believe there are no absolutes. And, I don't know if I believe that. I believe there are absolutes. I believe, I also believe that I don't think I've found them yet. I think we're close. It's honestly probably not something I'd want to share because, we're trying to refine that. We're trying to refine that as an organization too. So, but I do believe there are some absolutes, and maybe it's just a few. In skill acquisition, we'd probably describe it as an attractor. Unfortunately, I think there's hundreds of attractors you could argue in the swing. But training some of those must-have movements that you go across the board and, besides those outliers, besides the 100 pence, besides your, I'm trying to think of another guy who's a little odd. But in any case, we have to find something to base our training around, and especially at the youth level, we got to figure out, what are those two pieces that we absolutely cannot miss, and can we either one create a drill around that and start to force an adaptation a little bit and be as hands off as possible. We're going to have to talk. We're going to have to communicate. You're going to have to cue. But what do your cues consist of? What are some ways that you can kind of plant some seeds and allow kids to kind of process stuff instead of tell them what to do. And I think that's where drills become so valuable. And I think that's also where drill becomes a junk term. It's, you can call anything a drill. So, I think for me that number one thing I would say is if you can figure out how to, besides the resistance training, is figure out how to find those movements that these young guys need to have, and that based off an assessment you can see you got to manipulate just a little bit, man. I think this will kind of change the way you think about and feel your swing, and I think ultimately our results kind of drive our long-term results, not our results in that cage session. Our long-term results drive how we're going to train.
Guys, let me tell you, that debate was phenomenal. It really was. The guys in the chat have all said that it was great. Unfortunately, somebody has to advance and somebody doesn't, and I wish I didn't have to say that because this was something else. I learned a ton. Real quick, Steve, give us your website again.
It's Englishbey hitting, oddly enough. And then, of course, I'm on Twitter, post occasionally there. So you can kind of look for me at those places.
Fantastic. Jordan, go ahead and give us your website as well.
I just put it in the chat, but it's hitbig.net, HITBIG, and then my Twitter and Instagram handles are @hittingforpower.
Guys, again, that was phenomenal. That actually ends up concluding our entire first round. So if you guys enjoyed the first round, please go to expertsummit.com. That's expert, XPERT. And go ahead and purchase the second round. By purchasing the first round, you will get replays of every single debate, including this one, which was absolutely phenomenal. Please shoot us a retweet, shoot us a follow. Let us know. Follow these guys on both their social media, their website. We're trying to build this event, and we think it's something that's worthwhile. Where on a Thursday night can you listen to these two absolute powerhouse hitting coaches and just overall just mentors in the game talk about baseball? There's not many platforms that do this. Again, give Jordan a follow, give Steve a follow, support them, shoot us a retweet. Judges, go ahead, vote. Guys, thank you so much for joining us. That was unbelievable. I have no idea how they're going to pick. That being said, I look forward to seeing you guys all Monday.
Well, thanks. Thanks for inviting me. I really appreciate it. Jordan, nice talking to you. Good luck to yourself. Sounds like you're, doing good stuff. So good for you. Stay in touch. If you, feel free to contact me anytime if you want to.
Absolutely, man. I will.
Thank you, guys. Everybody have a good night. Oh, no, go ahead, Jordan. Sorry.
No, thank you. I appreciate it. Steve, it was great talking, riffing about it, man.
Good stuff, guys. Everybody have a good night.